My brother sent the text on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray October Tuesday when the sky can't decide what it wants to do. I was eating lunch at my desk, leftover pasta, barely reheated, when my phone buzzed against the keyboard. "Hey, we've been talking and Raina's not comfortable with Kit being there. It would be better if you came to the wedding solo. It's just one day. I know you'll understand." I read it 3 times. Not because the words were complicated. Because I was waiting for the part where he was joking. He wasn't joking. Before I tell you what happened after that, and believe me, what happened after that is the part they still don't talk about. Let me ask you something. Have you ever given someone everything and then watched them hand it back to you in pieces? I'm 32 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, where the air is thin and the winters are honest, and nobody expects anything from you that you haven't already agreed to give. I work in project coordination for an architecture firm, which means I spend my days making sure other people's plans don't fall apart. There's probably something deeply personal in that career choice. I've thought about it. I grew up in Cincinnati, the older kid, the one who figured things out. My brother Shaw was 3 years behind me and about 20 years ahead in terms of the attention he collected without trying. He was funny in a way that made strangers stop mid-conversation. He remembered people's names, their coffee orders, their dogs' birthdays. He walked into rooms and rooms responded. My parents loved us both. I want to be clear about that. But they worried about Shaw in a way they never worried about me, and somewhere along the way that worry got confused with investment. The more they poured into him, the more they cared about the return. I was the sure thing. Shaw was the bet they couldn't stop making. When I was 26, I moved to Denver for a job. When I was 29, I met Kit, who is patient and funny and keeps a running list of every good documentary she's ever seen. I built a life here. It wasn't dramatic. It was just mine. 18 months ago, my parents called me from Cincinnati. My mother was crying in that specific way she cried when she was trying not to. Short breaths, long silences. My father stayed quiet, which was worse. They'd made some bad investment decisions over the past few years. They'd also, I learned that night, been letting Shaw borrow against their home equity line for a catering business idea that never quite launched. The numbers were bad. They were 4 months behind on their mortgage. Their retirement accounts were nearly drained. The bank had started formal correspondence. They were going to lose the house. I didn't think about it very long. Maybe I should have. I had spent 11 years building what I had, a solid 401(n), a savings account I'd added to every month since my first paycheck, a small investment portfolio I barely touched. I liquidated almost all of it. I sold the car I'd planned to keep another 5 years. I wired my parents $340,000 over the course of 3 weeks. My attorney, a meticulous man named Soren who I'd hired for a lease dispute 2 years earlier, insisted on a formal agreement. I almost said it wasn't necessary. I'm glad I didn't. My parents signed it at their kitchen table in Cincinnati while I sat on a video call watching their hands shake over the pages. The agreement was simple. I held the deed as collateral. They had 18 months to either buy the house back at market value or begin paying me rent. The deadline was a formality. We all thought at the time. Just paperwork. Just protection. Shaw was on that call too. He didn't have any money to contribute. His catering venture had cost them more than it earned. But he sat there nodding, being supportive in the way he was best at. Warmly, without doing anything specific. He signed the document, witness line. He'd read it, he said. He'd look it over properly later. 11 months ago, Shaw came to me with a new idea. Not catering anymore, event planning. Corporate retreats, upscale weddings, milestone parties. He'd found a business partner, had a space in Cincinnati's Gaslight District, and had already talked to potential clients. He just needed a co-signer for an SBA loan, $115,000. He'd handle every payment himself, he promised. He just needed someone with a clean credit history standing behind the application. I thought about it for 4 days. Then I said yes. Soren drew up a side agreement between Shaw and me, not with the bank, just between us, outlining repayment expectations and what would happen if he fell behind. Shaw signed it with the same loose-wristed ease of someone who has never personally lived through a consequence. For a while, it seemed to work. His company booked its first weddings within 4 months. He started an Instagram account posting about being a bootstrapped entrepreneur. He gave interviews to a local lifestyle blog. He talked about building something from the ground up, the hard way, by himself. I watched from Denver. I kept my mouth shut. But I noticed that the monthly loan statements coming to my email showed missed payments in month 7 and again in month 9. Shaw always caught up, always explained it as cash flow timing. I started keeping a folder. Then, 3 weeks before his own wedding, to Raina, whom he'd met at one of his company's events and who had very particular ideas about how things should look, he sent me that text on a Tuesday afternoon. Raina's not comfortable with Kit being there. It's just one day. I know you'll understand. I sat at my desk and finished the rest of my cold pasta. I didn't call Kit right away. I didn't text back immediately. I just sat with it. The specific weight of being told your life is an inconvenience by someone whose life you quietly built the foundation under. I waited for the part of me that would make excuses for him. That part had always been there before. The voice that said he didn't mean it that way, and it's complicated, and he's under so much stress with the wedding. That voice didn't show up this time. I typed back, "I understand, thank you for letting me know." Then I opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder labeled Family Docs, every signed agreement, every bank statement, every loan notice. The 18-month grace period on my parents' house ended in 9 days, right after the wedding weekend. I opened Soren's contact and called him. "I need to start the process on both accounts," I said when he picked up. "Both?" He knew what I meant, but asked anyway. "The house and the loan cosign review." A pause. "You're sure about the timing?" "I didn't choose the timing," I said. "He did." Soren got to work. I spent that week doing something I hadn't done in 2 years. I made plans that were only mine. Kit and I had been postponing a road trip to the coast, once for a work deadline, once because I'd been quietly too stressed to commit to being present for something good. This time I booked the cabin. I packed a bag. I let the documents move through the channels they were meant to move through, cleanly, legally, exactly as written. I didn't call my parents to warn them. I didn't reach out to Shaw. I had carried their weight for long enough. I wasn't going to carry the warning too. What I know about the day of the wedding comes from 2 sources. My cousin Adelaide was there and texted me throughout. She has the particular talent of being present at historic moments and knowing exactly which details matter. And my parents called me 4 days later, once they'd had time to stop spinning what had happened and just say it plainly. The ceremony itself, from what Adelaide described, was genuinely beautiful. Raina's dress was extraordinary. Shaw cried at the altar, which surprised everyone and charmed the room. There were string quartet arrangements and past appetizers that his company was catering as a live showcase, because Shaw had invited 2 prospective clients to the reception specifically to see Meridian Events in action. A couple planning a 40th anniversary party, a corporate HR manager scouting vendors for a company retreat. That detail, as it turned out, was the one that mattered most. During the cocktail hour, a courier arrived at the venue. He was polite and efficient. He had 2 envelopes, one addressed to my father from Soren's office regarding the property agreement and the formal end of the 18-month grace period. The other addressed to Meridian Events LLC at their registered business address, from the bank, flagging the co-signer review and requesting a meeting within 30 business days. My father opened his envelope near the bar. Adelaide was close enough to see his face change. Shaw's business partner found the second envelope on the events table and brought it to Shaw between the salad course and the entree. From what Adelaide described, the 20 minutes that followed were very quiet in the way that precedes something loud. Shaw stepped away from the table with his business partner. Raina's father, who ran a competing events company in Columbus and had come partly to see whether Shaw was a professional worth watching, was standing close enough to hear fragments of the conversation. Adelaide said she watched his expression go from politely neutral to carefully still. The anniversary couple and the HR manager left before dessert was served. My phone sat face down on the cabin coffee table in Northern California while Kit and I sat outside watching the light change over the water. Shaw called 14 times during the reception. I didn't count them until the next morning. I answered on Sunday. "What did you do?" It wasn't a question. His voice had that flat, controlled quality it gets when he's trying to hold something together. "I enforced 2 legal agreements," I said, "both of which you were present for when they were signed. On my wedding day." "You chose the date," I said. "I didn't." You're comparing those 2 things? A seating preference and a legal filing?" "I'm not comparing them," I said. "One was personal, one was professional. They have nothing to do with each other." He was quiet for a moment. I heard him breathing. "You wanted to humiliate me," he said, "in front of my clients, in front of Raina's family." "Shaw," I kept my voice level. "You've been 2 payments behind on that loan twice in the past year. I have it documented. The bank was going to flag it regardless of what I did or didn't do. I simply stopped actively running interference." "And making Mom and Dad pay rent to you?" "They signed an agreement 18 months ago. It wasn't hidden in the footnotes. Soren walked all of you through every clause. They knew the timeline." Silence, longer this time. "You always do this," he said, and his voice cracked slightly at the edge of the sentence. "You make everything about what you're owed." That landed differently than he intended it to, I think, because what I felt in that moment wasn't hurt. What I felt was something that had no drama in it at all, just a clean, flat recognition, the kind that comes when someone finally says the quiet thing they've been thinking out loud. "Shaw," I said, "I paid off our parents' house by myself. I co-signed your business loan because you asked me and because I believed in what you were building. In 2 years, I have never once, in front of you or anyone else, made you feel small for needing it. But when you told me my partner couldn't come to your wedding because her presence was inconvenient, that was the moment you decided what we were actually doing here." He didn't say anything. "I'm done holding weight that isn't mine," I said. "That's all this is." I ended the call before he could respond. Not to have the last word, just because there was nothing left to say. My mother called 4 days later. Not my father. He needed more time, which I understood. My mother. She didn't try to reframe what had happened. She'd always been good at that. Finding the angle that made Shaw's choices look reasonable, smoothing the edges so nobody had to feel the corners. But this time she just said, "I've been sitting with the last 2 years, thinking about what you did for us. And I don't think I understood the full size of it until I held that paper in my hands at the reception." I didn't say anything for a moment. "I'm not angry at you," I told her. "I need you to know that. The house situation wasn't punishment. It was always the arrangement." "I know," she said. "I know it was. I just think your father and I got very good at treating you like you were the arrangement. Like you were the plan and Shaw was the person." She meant it. I could hear it. Not damage control, not performance, just a woman in her 60s saying something true because she'd finally run out of ways to avoid it. We talked for nearly an hour. It was the longest real conversation we'd had in years, the kind that wasn't about logistics or what Shaw needed next. In the weeks that followed, my parents began to look at their finances with actual attention. They started monthly payments, small at first. They sold my grandmother's piano, some furniture my mother had been meaning to donate for years, a boat my father hadn't taken out in a decade. My father started tracking their spending in a color-coded spreadsheet, which was the most unexpected development of everything that happened. They didn't ask me to renegotiate the terms. They just started paying. Shaw was a different matter, and a slower one. The bank meeting happened 3 weeks after the wedding. Soren accompanied me on a video call. The review was procedural. I wasn't removing myself as co-signer immediately, only triggering a formal conversation about the loan's status and payment history. What the bank laid out wasn't dramatically different from what I already knew, but seeing it in a formal setting, across a conference table, apparently had an effect that my emails and Soren's letters hadn't managed. Shaw made every payment on time for the next 4 months. Raina's father, the Columbus events man, reached out to Shaw 2 weeks after the wedding, not hostile, practical. He'd seen enough at the reception to assess the situation accurately. Shaw had talent and connections but was thinly capitalized, structurally exposed, and now without a safety net. He offered Shaw a position, head of operations for his Cincinnati division, salary, benefits, stability, not ownership, not his name on the door, not the thing Shaw had spent a year building an identity around. Shaw took it. He didn't call me to say so. Adelaide mentioned it in passing casually, the way she mentioned things she suspected I already knew. I thought about that for a while. About the man who'd spent a year presenting himself as self-made, who now worked under his father-in-law. About what that feels like after a lifetime of things arriving before you had to reach for them. I hope it becomes something useful for him. I genuinely mean that. Not because it would vindicate me, but because he's 35 years old, and that's still young enough to learn what it actually feels like to build something from the real ground up, without someone quietly standing underneath. Kit and I took the trip we'd been postponing. 3 weeks in October, driving the Coast Highway north from Los Angeles, stopping wherever the light looked good. I bought a piece of art in a small gallery in Carmel that I'd wanted for longer than I could account for. We ate slowly. We slept with the windows open to the sound of the ocean. I did not check my family group chat for 6 consecutive days, which is the longest I'd gone in years, and the world did not end. Somewhere outside Sacramento on the drive home, Kit reached over and put her hand on mine on the gear shift. "How are you doing?" she asked. Not "how was your trip?" Not "how are things with your family?" "How are you doing?" Which is a different question. I thought about it honestly, the way you can when the road is long and the next obligation is hours away. "Even," I said. "For the first time in a really long time, I feel even." She nodded like she knew exactly what I meant, because she did, because she'd watched me spend 2 years slightly off balance, always tilted toward whoever needed something, finding my footing in the margins of my own life. Even wasn't triumphant. It wasn't the clean satisfaction of a story with a villain who finally gets what's coming. It was quieter than that, just the sensation of the ground rising up to meet me after a very long time of not quite touching it. My parents still call. My father has taken up bread baking, which is the most unexpected turn in this whole story, and he photographs every loaf and sends the pictures to me without explanation, just a small square of golden crust on a cooling rack. My mother joined a book club. They are, slowly, making something that has more room for them in it now that they've stopped filling every corner with whatever Shaw might need next. Shaw and I talk sometimes, not easily, not often, but we talk. Last month there was a pause in one of our calls, the kind that used to make me rush to fill it with something reassuring, and he said, "You always made it look so easy, just handling everything." "It wasn't," I said. "Yeah," he said, "I'm starting to understand that." It wasn't an apology, but it was something honest, which is rarer than apology and harder to say. If you are the one in your family who handles things, who pays, who shows up, who fixes the problem before anyone else has finished naming it, you already know that the hardest part isn't the sacrifice. It's the moment you stop, the moment you realize that the weight you've been carrying wasn't assigned to you by anyone with the authority to do so. You just kept reaching for it every time, because you'd been trained to believe the reaching was love. I'm not reaching anymore. And for the first time since I can remember, when I open my hands, they feel like they belong to me.